My husband swore he had moved on from his ex-wife, until I found out he had been waiting for her to come back all along. People say if something feels too good to be true, it probably is. I used to think that was just something bitter people said after getting their hearts broken. Because my life, it was good, steady, safe. I had a husband who adored me. Daniel, 36, smart, successful, the kind of man who never forgot an anniversary, never left a text unanswered, never gave me a reason to doubt him. He was the man who made me coffee in the morning, who held my hand in public, who kissed me on the forehead like I was the most precious thing in the world. 4 years of marriage, and I had never once questioned him. Not once. Until one night, at a company party, when a stranger looked me in the eye and casually shattered my entire reality. "Oh, you're still together? I thought Daniel and Olivia were just taking some time apart." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, what?" The man, middle-aged, sharp suit, polite smile, shifted uncomfortably, like he just realized he had said something he shouldn't have. "Oh, nothing. I just didn't realize Daniel had remarried." I let out a small, confused laugh. "We've been married for 4 years. His eyebrows raised slightly, but he quickly covered it with a chuckle. "Right, of course, my mistake." I turned to Daniel, expecting him to laugh, to correct the man. Instead, he just smiled, calm, effortless, too smooth. "Robert's mistaken. Don't worry about it." He squeezed my waist gently, then changed the subject. Just like that. And I let him. But something inside me shifted, the first crack in the perfect life I thought I had. I didn't bring it up that night, or the next day. Because it was nothing, right? Just a misunderstanding. But still, it clung to me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. The way Robert had hesitated, the way Daniel had not hesitated at all. A few days later, while Daniel was out, I sat on the couch, phone in hand, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Olivia. I wasn't sure what I was even looking for. Proof that she had moved on? Some reassurance that she was out of our lives? Her social media was private. No posts, no updates, nothing to suggest she even existed. But when I clicked on her tagged photos, I found something. A recent event, a charity gala. Daniel hadn't attended, but his parents had, his sister too. And right there, standing beside them, smiling like she still belonged, Olivia. My chest tightened. Daniel had told me they had parted ways amicably, that they weren't in touch. So why was she still showing up in his family's life, like she was never gone? I didn't say anything to him that night, but I started paying attention. One evening, Daniel was in the shower, and I was curled up in bed scrolling mindlessly through my phone. His was charging on the nightstand beside me. I wasn't looking for anything, I wasn't. But then his screen lit up, a notification, an unsaved number. "You're coming over later, right?" My stomach flipped. My hands felt cold. I stared at the message, my heartbeat in my ears. I could have unlocked his phone right then, could have scrolled through his texts, could have called the number back. Instead, I did nothing. I sat there, waiting. When Daniel stepped out of the shower, towel slung around his waist, hair damp, I looked at him like I was seeing him for the first time. And he smiled, so easy, so normal, too normal. I didn't ask about the message, I wasn't ready to know, but something had shifted. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't trust my husband. I didn't ask him about the message that night. I told myself I needed to be sure before I accused him of anything, that I wasn't going to turn into one of those paranoid wives who searched for problems where there were none. But deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel. I lay there, watching his chest rise and fall, my mind replaying that text message over and over again. "You're coming over later, right?" I needed to see the rest of the conversation. I needed to know. Daniel's phone was still on the nightstand. My fingers hovered over it. Then, as if sensing my thoughts, Daniel stirred beside me. He reached for his phone without hesitation, checked the screen, and casually put it back down. No reaction. No sign that he had anything to hide. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? I got up and made coffee, trying to shake the feeling. Everything was normal. Daniel kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, same as always. But when the door closed behind him, I felt something crack inside me. I grabbed my phone. I needed answers. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I started small. I opened our phone bill records online, not something I had ever done before, but suddenly, I needed to know. I scrolled through Daniel's call logs, expecting to see the usual work contacts, my number, a few friends, and then I saw it. Olivia. Not just once, repeatedly. A pattern. Late at night, early in the morning, calls that lasted 30 seconds and others that lasted over an hour. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I knew they had history. I knew they had been married before. But Daniel had told me they hadn't spoken in years. That she was in his past. So why was he talking to her now? I swallowed hard, my hands shaking as I scrolled through more records. Then I saw something worse. The number that had sent that message last night. The one that asked, "You're coming over later, right?" It wasn't Olivia's. It was a different number entirely. That evening, I tried to act normal. Daniel walked in, loosened his tie, kissed my forehead, and asked how my day was. I forced a smile. Fine. I waited until after dinner, until we were sitting together on the couch, his arm draped around my shoulder, like everything was still okay. Then I asked, "Do you still talk to Olivia?" His hand froze for half a second, then he laughed. "Where did that come from?" I shrugged, keeping my voice light. "Just curious." He tilted his head, studying me. "No, not really. Maybe once or twice, just about some paperwork stuff, but that was a long time ago." A lie. I looked him in the eye and nodded like I believed him. But inside I felt something break. My husband was lying to me, and I was going to find out why. A lie is like a crack in glass. Small at first, almost invisible, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if you press on it hard enough, it shatters. I didn't want to press. I didn't want to break my marriage apart. But Daniel had already cracked it the moment he lied to my face. So I pressed. And I shattered everything. The next morning, after Daniel left for work, I opened my laptop. I typed Olivia's name again. This time, I searched deeper. Not just her social media, but everything. News articles, old job listings, anything connected to her name. And that's when I found something that made my stomach drop. A real estate listing. A luxury apartment. Rented 6 months ago, under Daniel's name. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands cold. He had never mentioned buying another property. Not for work. Not for investment, not at all. So who was living there? I should have called him, confronted him. But instead, I grabbed my keys. The apartment was across town, in a high-rise with a sleek lobby and a doorman who barely glanced at me as I walked in. My heart pounded as I stepped into the elevator. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, that I didn't want to know. But I pressed the button. I walked down the hallway, and I knocked. At first there was nothing. Then the door opened, and there she was, Olivia. Standing in front of me, in Daniel's apartment, looking at me like she had been expecting this moment, like she already knew who the real outsider was. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Olivia let out a soft sigh, stepping aside. "You should come in." I don't know why I did, maybe because I needed to hear her say it, maybe because a part of me already knew what she was going to say. The apartment was lived in. Not just a spare place Daniel used for work. There were books stacked on the coffee table, a half-empty glass of wine on the counter, a sweater draped over the couch. Olivia sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. And then so casually, so effortlessly, she said, "I never left him, you know." My breath caught. She gave me a small, almost sympathetic smile. "I mean, legally, sure, we divorced, but Daniel and we were never really over." I shook my head. "That's not true." Her eyes softened, like she was talking to a child who didn't understand the world yet. "Then why are you here, Emma?" Silence. I didn't have an answer. Because I knew. Deep down, I had always known. Daniel and Olivia had never truly ended. I was just the pause between their two chapters, and I had never even seen it coming. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember crying. I don't remember much of anything except sitting on my bed, staring at nothing, waiting for Daniel to come home. And when he did, he walked in like everything was fine, like he hadn't just spent the afternoon with her. And I finally asked, "How long?" Daniel froze, just for a second. Then he sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. Not shocked, not confused, just tired. Like he had been waiting for this conversation, like he had always known this day would come. "Emma, it's complicated." Complicated. Not "I love you," not "she doesn't mean anything," not "I can explain," just complicated. And in that moment, I knew. I had already lost him before I even realized I was in a competition. There's a moment right before everything falls apart when time slows down. A moment where you realize you're not angry anymore. Not sad, not in denial, just done. Sitting on that couch, staring at my husband who had spent our entire marriage waiting for another woman to come back to him, I felt something inside me snap. I wasn't gonna fight for him, because he had never been mine to begin with. Daniel sat across from me, rubbing his temples like this was hard for him, like I was the one being unreasonable, like I was overreacting to the fact that he had been emotionally married to his ex-wife this entire time. Emma, it's not what you think. I laughed. Actually laughed. Not what I think? So you didn't rent Olivia an apartment? You didn't lie to my face about still talking to her? You didn't spend 4 years making me think I was your wife when I was really just a placeholder? He flinched at that. Good. I waited for him to deny it, to beg, to say something that would make me hesitate. But he didn't. Instead, he sighed, looking down at his hands. I didn't plan for this to happen. That was when I realized something. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was just sorry that I found out. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand to know why he even married me if he was never going to let her go. But I didn't, because it didn't matter anymore. So instead I stood up. I want a divorce. Daniel's head snapped up, like it hadn't even occurred to him that I might leave, like he thought I would just accept it. Emma, wait, no, I cut him off. I'm done waiting. I turned to walk away, but then I paused. One last thing. I looked at him, this man I had spent 4 years loving, and asked, "Did you ever love me?" His jaw tightened, he hesitated. And that was all the answer I needed. I didn't cry when I packed my things. I didn't cry when I walked out of that apartment, out of that life, out of that lie. I didn't cry when I filed for divorce. And I sure as hell didn't cry when I drained our shared bank account before I left. Because here's the thing. Daniel didn't deserve a goodbye. He had already said the day he let Olivia stay in his life, while expecting me to stay in mine. I heard later that things between him and Olivia didn't last. Maybe she realized she didn't actually want him back. Maybe he realized that losing me wasn't as complicated as he thought. Maybe they deserved each other. I didn't care. Because by the time he figured out that I was gone, I had already built a life where his name meant nothing. People like Daniel and Olivia never think they're the villains. They rewrite the story in their heads, twist the truth into something more palatable, something that makes them the victims of circumstance instead of the architects of their own destruction. Because admitting that they were selfish, that they used and discarded me like I was nothing, that would mean taking responsibility. And people like them never do. Daniel wasn't a liar in the traditional sense. He didn't sneak around, didn't have secret burner phones or hidden dating apps. His betrayal was quieter, more insidious. He didn't cheat on me in the way that people expect, with stolen kisses and late-night rendezvous. He cheated in the way that mattered most. He let me believe that I was his wife, when in reality, I was just the safe option, the easy choice. He married me, not because he loved me more than Olivia, but because I wasn't her. Because with me, he didn't have to fight. There were no passionate arguments, no emotional roller coasters. I was steady, reliable, a life he could control. And maybe he even convinced himself that he loved me. But love isn't something you settle for. And in the end, he didn't want me. He just didn't want to be alone. Olivia never had to steal Daniel back, because she never lost him in the first place. She walked away once, knowing that if she ever wanted to return, he'd be waiting. She never had to fight for him, never had to make a real effort to fix what was broken. She just had to exist. And that's the worst part. She didn't stay because she loved him. She stayed because she could, because having him was easier than not having him. And in the end, I think that's why it didn't last between them. Because once I was gone, once Daniel no longer had a second option, Olivia had to face the truth too. She didn't want him back. She just didn't want me to have him either. Looking back, I don't regret leaving. I regret not seeing it sooner. I regret wasting years of my life thinking that if I just loved him enough, if I was patient enough, if I proved myself enough, he would choose me. But that's not how love works. If someone loves you, you don't have to convince them. And if you have to fight for a place in their life, you were never meant to be there in the first place. So here's what I learned. Love should never feel like a competition. If someone makes you feel replaceable, walk away before they prove you right. The most dangerous lie is the one you tell yourself, that they'll change, that they'll realize, that they'll choose you. Because the truth is, they already made their choice. You're just too afraid to see it. My husband swore he had moved on from his ex-wife, until I found out he had been waiting for her to come back all along.